Have you ever felt like life was trying to tell you something? Like certain events, certain moments, certain discoveries weren't just random coincidences, but something far more profound? Right now, in this very moment, you're experiencing exactly that. You didn't stumble upon this video by accident. You were drawn here by forces you might not fully understand yet, but forces that are about to reveal themselves to you in ways that will change everything you thought you knew about how reality actually works. There's an ancient truth that only a select few throughout history have truly grasped, a truth so powerful that once you understand it, you can never see the world the same way again. The universe isn't just some vast, indifferent expanse of space and time. It's a living, breathing intelligence that responds to you, to your thoughts, to your deepest beliefs and emotions. Every single moment of your life, every person you've met, every challenge you've faced, every opportunity that's come your way, none of it has been random. You've been sending signals out into the infinite field of possibility, and the universe has been answering those signals with mathematical precision. Think about the last time something unexpected happened in your life, something that felt almost too perfectly timed to be mere chance. Has this ever happened to you? You were thinking about someone, and suddenly they called. You needed an answer, and it appeared in the most unlikely way. You felt stuck, and then a door opened, seemingly out of nowhere. These aren't coincidences. They're evidence of something far more extraordinary at work. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Your mind is not just processing reality, it's actively creating it. Every thought you think, every belief you hold, every emotion you feel is broadcasting a frequency into the universe. And here's what most people never realize. The universe doesn't judge your signals as good or bad, worthy or unworthy. It simply mirrors them back to you with unwavering accuracy. If you're broadcasting doubt, you'll receive circumstances that confirm that doubt. If you're broadcasting possibility, doors will open that you never knew existed. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. The fact that this information has found you right now, at this exact moment in your life, is not a coincidence. There's a reason why certain knowledge appears to us only when we're ready to receive it. And if you're here, reading these words, feeling something stir inside you, then you're ready. The universe has been preparing you for this moment. Every experience you've had, every lesson you've learned, every challenge that shaped you, it's all been leading you here. And now, the universe is opening a window for you. Not tomorrow, not someday when conditions are perfect, but right now. There's a transformation period that begins the moment you truly understand what I'm about to share with you. A 7-day window where reality itself becomes more fluid, more responsive to your intentions than you ever thought possible. During these 7 days, you'll start noticing things, small things. At first, a conversation that answers a question you'd been silently asking, a chance encounter that leads somewhere unexpected, numbers or symbols that keep appearing. These aren't random occurrences, they're the universe confirming that you've tuned into a frequency most people spend their entire lives unaware of. Let me tell you about something that happened to a man who discovered this truth in the most unexpected way. His name was Clarence, and he owned a small shop in a town where business had been declining for years. Every morning he'd unlock his doors with the same heavy thought weighing on his mind. No one comes anymore. These are difficult times. And you know what happened? His words became his reality. Day after day, fewer customers walked through his door. His belief in scarcity created more scarcity, like a self-fulfilling prophecy he didn't even realize he was writing. But here's where the story takes a remarkable turn. One morning, an old woman stopped by his shop and said something that would change everything. Your words weave the fabric of your days. The universe responds not to what you see, but to what you believe. Clarence dismissed it at first. It sounded too simple, almost naive. How could just changing what he said change his actual circumstances? But that night, something made him try it. Despite his empty shelves and quiet store, he decided to speak different words. "I welcome abundance," he said aloud, even though every logical part of his brain told him it was foolish. Within hours, not days, not weeks, but hours, a traveling caravan stopped at his shop unexpectedly, his store filled with customers. The very thing he had been desperately chasing while affirming its absence suddenly appeared the moment he aligned his words with what he wanted instead of what he feared. This is the hidden truth about how reality actually works. Your thoughts aren't passive observations floating through your mind. They're active forces, electrical currents, broadcasting into the infinite field of possibilities, and that field responds with absolute precision. Most people go through life completely unaware of this dynamic. They think their thoughts are private, inconsequential, separate from the world around them. But every thought you think, every word you speak, every belief you hold is literally programming your reality. When you say, "I never have enough," the universe hears that as an instruction and delivers more situations where you don't have enough. When you say, "Things never work out for me," you're requesting more experiences of things not working out. The universe isn't punishing you. It's simply giving you exactly what you're asking for through the frequency you're broadcasting. If this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. This is just the beginning of a deeper journey we're walking together, and every video here is designed to unlock new layers of truth. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because understanding the mechanism is one thing, but actually applying it in a way that creates real transformation in your life is something entirely different. The shift that happened in Clarence's shop didn't occur because he simply thought positive thoughts while secretly believing the opposite. It happened because something fundamental changed in his internal state. He moved from a place of lack, where he was focused on what wasn't there, to a place of receptivity, where he opened himself to what it could be there. That subtle but profound shift in consciousness is what triggered the immediate change in his external circumstances. This is the journey you're on right now, whether you fully realize it or not. Every moment you spend understanding these principles, you're rewiring the deep programming that's been running your life on autopilot. The decisions you make, the mindset you cultivate, the inner dialogue you maintain, all of it is creating ripples that will expand into waves of real, tangible change. And those 7 days I mentioned, they've already begun for you. Write in the comments, "I welcome abundance," if this is starting to make sense to you. There's something even more profound that happens when you truly grasp this principle. And it's something most people get completely backwards. They wait for their circumstances to change before they allow themselves to feel differently. They say things like, "I'll be happy when I find love," or "I'll feel abundant when I have more money," or "I'll feel confident when I achieve success." But here's the hidden truth that changes everything. The feeling must come first. The internal state precedes the external manifestation, not the other way around. There was a woman named Hattie who understood this at a level most people never reach. She lived alone and felt the weight of loneliness pressing on her daily. But instead of sitting in that emptiness, waiting for someone to fill it, she did something extraordinary. She began living as if the companionship she desired had already arrived. She set 2 chairs on her porch, not as a desperate hope, but as a declaration of certainty. She brewed tea for 2 every afternoon, sitting in one chair while the other remained empty. She tended to her garden with the joy of someone preparing a shared space, not the sadness of someone working alone. Now, you might be thinking this sounds like self-deception, like pretending something is true when it clearly isn't. But that's not what was happening at all. Hattie wasn't denying her current reality. She was choosing to vibrate at the frequency of her desired reality. She understood something most people miss entirely. Your emotional state is a broadcast signal, and the universe matches that signal with experiences of the same frequency. When you feel lonely and act from that loneliness, you magnetize more experiences that confirm your isolation. But when you feel the warmth of connection, even before it manifests, physically you become a magnet for actual connection. Within weeks, a fellow gardener moved into the house next to hers. Their shared love of flowers naturally brought them together, and a deep friendship blossomed. But here's what's crucial to understand. This wasn't luck or coincidence. Hattie had fundamentally shifted her vibration from one of lack to one of fullness. She had chosen joy before evidence appeared, and the evidence had no choice but to follow. This is how reality actually operates, beneath the surface of what most people perceive. Your thoughts aren't just mental noise happening inside your skull. They're electromagnetic frequencies broadcasting into the quantum field of infinite possibilities, and that field responds by collapsing into experiences that match your dominant vibration. When you think a thought, you're not just observing an idea. You're sending out a signal that ripples through the very fabric of existence. Every cell in your body responds to that thought. Your nervous system adjusts, your energy field shifts, and the universe, reading that signal with absolute precision, begins orchestrating circumstances that align with it. This is why two people can take the exact same actions and get completely different results. One person sends out job applications while broadcasting the frequency of desperation and doubt, wondering if anyone will want them. Another sends out the same applications while holding the inner knowing that the right opportunity is already seeking them out. The second person gets callbacks. The first person wonders why nothing ever works out. The difference isn't in their resumes or qualifications, it's in the invisible signal they're broadcasting with every thought and feeling. Most people spend their entire lives waiting for evidence to change their beliefs, never realizing they have it backwards. They want to see it before they believe it. But the universe operates on a different principle entirely. Believe it so completely that seeing it becomes inevitable. This isn't about forcing yourself to think positively while your deeper beliefs contradict those thoughts. It's about understanding that your dominant vibration, the one you maintain consistently, not just when you're consciously trying, is what creates your reality. And that vibration is shaped by the thoughts you think repeatedly, the beliefs you hold about yourself and the world, and the emotional states you choose to inhabit. The transformation that's available to you isn't just about getting better things or having nicer experiences. It's about fundamentally understanding how you've been creating your reality all along, unconsciously, and learning to do it consciously instead. When you realize that your thoughts are actual forces shaping the world around you, everything changes. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the conscious creator of your experience. You stop waiting for life to happen to you and start understanding that life is happening through you, responding to the signals you're constantly broadcasting. If you're starting to see how this applies to your own life, write in the comments, "I'm ready for this shift." The shift I'm describing isn't just theoretical. It plays out in the lives of real people in ways that are sometimes hard to believe until you see the pattern repeating over and over. There was an artist named Roy who spent years creating beautiful work, but every brushstroke was painted with a silent question. Will they like this? Is this good enough? Will anyone appreciate what I'm doing? His eyes would constantly dart to the faces of people passing by his small gallery space, searching for validation, reading their expressions, like a desperate detective looking for clues about his own worth. And here's what happened as a result of that energy. His art was technically excellent, his skills were undeniable, but something was missing. People would glance at his work and move on. Sales were scarce, recognition was elusive. Roy couldn't understand it. He was talented, he worked hard, he poured himself into every piece. But what he didn't realize was that the energy of seeking approval, the vibration of "I need you to tell me I'm good enough," was embedded in every painting. People could feel it, even if they couldn't name it. That desperate energy actually repelled the very validation he was seeking. Then something shifted. An old master. Painter stopped one day and asked him a simple question. "Why do you paint?" And Roy realized with sudden clarity that he had lost touch with the pure joy that first drew him to art. He had become so focused on external approval that the internal fire had dimmed. That night, he painted alone in his studio, not for galleries or collectors or critics, but for himself. He reconnected with that space of certainty, that feeling of being absorbed in creation for its own sake. The work that emerged from that session was different. It carried a confidence, an authenticity, a completeness that his previous work had lacked. Within weeks, collectors began seeking him out. The exact validation he had been chasing desperately now arrived effortlessly, drawn to the shift in his internal state. This is the paradox that unlocks so much. When you stop needing external validation and find that certainty within yourself, the external validation appears naturally. The universe mirrors your inner state with such precision that it's almost mathematical. When you broadcast lack, you receive lack. When you broadcast wholeness, you receive abundance. The outer world is always reflecting what's happening inside you. This same principle showed up in the life of a woman named Lillian, but in a completely different context. She lived modestly, constantly worried about having enough. Every coin she earned was clutched with anxiety about tomorrow. Her thoughts were consumed with calculations and fears. What if there isn't enough? What if something breaks? What if? And her reality matched that vibration perfectly. Things did break. Unexpected expenses did appear. The scarcity she feared kept manifesting because her dominant frequency was tuned to lack. Then one morning, something shifted in her awareness. Looking at her small vegetable garden, instead of worrying about whether it would produce enough, she whispered, "I have food to eat today." Gazing at her humble cottage, rather than focusing on what it lacked, she murmured, "I have shelter that keeps me warm." Day after day, she began acknowledging the gifts already present in her life, and something extraordinary began to happen. Her energy field transformed from one of anxious grasping to one of grateful receiving. The impact was immediate and undeniable. A neighbor approached her with a partnership opportunity in a thriving textile business. Her garden, tended with appreciation rather than worry, yielded more than it ever had. Prosperity found her not because she worked harder or got luckier, but because her vibration had fundamentally changed. She had shifted from focusing on what was missing to appreciating what was present, and that shift in focus changed everything. This is the hidden mechanism behind so many success stories that people attribute to luck or coincidence. It's not luck, it's alignment. When you appreciate what you have, you're not just being polite or practicing some superficial positivity technique. You're literally tuning your frequency to abundance. Gratitude is the highest vibration of prosperity consciousness because it acknowledges fullness rather than emptiness. And the universe, responding to that signal of fullness, brings more to be full about. What you appreciate quite literally appreciates. It grows, it multiplies, it expands. This isn't metaphorical. It's how the energetic mechanics of reality actually function. The journey from unconscious Creation to conscious manifestation requires you to become aware of these patterns in your own life. Where are you seeking externally what can only be found internally? Where are you focused on lack instead of abundance? Where are you waiting for evidence before you shift your vibration, when the shift in vibration is what creates the evidence? Put in the comments, "I see the pattern now," if this is resonating with your experience. These patterns reveal something even more challenging for most people to accept, and it has to do with timing and control. We live in a culture that glorifies planning, strategy, and the illusion that we can orchestrate every detail of our lives if we're just smart enough or work hard enough. But there's a deeper intelligence at work, one that sees possibilities you can't see from your limited vantage point. And learning to trust that intelligence, even when it contradicts your carefully laid plans, is where real transformation begins. There was a merchant's daughter named Pearl who embodied this struggle perfectly. She had inherited her father's keen eye for valuable goods and understood trade better than most people twice her age. But she was paralyzed by perfectionism. Every day, caravans would pass through the city gates, carrying opportunities for profitable trades. And every day Pearl would calculate and recalculate, analyze and reanalyze, waiting for the perfect moment that never seemed to arrive. She watched chance after chance slip away, each one feeling like another confirmation that she'd missed her window. What Pearl didn't understand was that the universe doesn't operate through perfect timing, it operates through perfect trust. Those moments she thought she'd missed weren't actually missed opportunities at all. They were life's way of steering her away from paths that would have led to dead ends she couldn't see. But her mind, trapped in the illusion of control, interpreted every deviation from her plan as failure. She was so focused on forcing things to happen according to her timeline that she couldn't see the bigger choreography unfolding around her. The breakthrough came when she finally released her grip on how things had to unfold. She started making decisions based on what felt aligned in the moment rather than what her fearful mind insisted was the right choice. And suddenly, opportunities she never could have planned for began appearing. Partnerships formed in unexpected ways. Resources showed up from directions she hadn't been watching. Her business flourished, not because she finally got the timing right, but because she stopped trying to control the timing altogether and learned to flow with the intelligence that was guiding her all along. This same revelation came to a traveler named Victor, though his lesson arrived in a much more dramatic fashion. He had meticulously planned a route to the Eastern Kingdoms, studying maps, consulting experienced traders, calculating every detail down to which villages he'd stop at along the way. Then a landslide blocked his carefully plotted path, forcing him onto an unmarked trail through the mountains. His first reaction was frustration, anger, the feeling that fate was working against him. He could have turned back, could have waited for the main road to clear, could have clung to his original plan. If this landed for you, hit that like button. It's you acknowledging this message was meant for you, and it helps this reach others who are ready for it. But something inside him chose differently. Instead of resisting this unexpected detour, he surrendered to it. He trusted that maybe, just maybe, this disruption was actually redirection. That unmarked mountain path led him to a hidden valley where rare medicinal herbs grew in abundance. Herbs that would eventually make his fortune in ways his original plan never could have achieved. The landslide that seemed like a disaster was actually divine intervention steering him towards something far greater than he'd imagined for himself. This is where most people get stuck in their journey. They create a vision of how their life should unfold, and then they spend all their energy trying to force reality to match that vision. When life presents a detour, a delay, a door that closes, they interpret it as failure or bad luck. They resist, they push back, they try to muscle their way back to the plan. But what if those detours are actually course corrections? What if the delays are protecting you from something you can't see yet? What if the closed doors are redirecting you toward open ones that lead somewhere better? The universe has access to information you don't have. It can see around corners, beyond horizons, into futures that haven't unfolded yet. Your job isn't to control every variable or orchestrate every detail. Your job is to stay aligned with your deepest desires while remaining flexible about how they manifest. Hold the vision, release the control, trust the process, surrender the timeline. This is the dance between intention and allowing that creates space for miracles. When you fight against what is, you create resistance that blocks your good. When you flow with what is while maintaining your vision of what can be, you become a cooperative component with the universe's intelligence. And that's when life starts surprising you in the best possible ways. Write in the comments, "I trust the detours," if you're learning to surrender. Control. Understanding the mechanics of how this all works requires looking at something most people never consider: the time lag between planting and harvesting. When a farmer plants seeds in the ground, they don't expect to see results the next day. They understand there's a natural gestation period, an invisible process happening beneath the surface before anything becomes visible. Your thoughts work exactly the same way. The life you're living right now is the harvest of seeds you planted weeks, months, even years ago. And the thoughts you're thinking today are planting seeds for the future you'll experience tomorrow. There was a woman named Elsie who discovered this truth in the most painful way. She tended a beautiful garden every morning, her hands moving through the soil with practiced skill, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. While her body worked in the present, her thoughts dwelt constantly in the past. Every failed venture, every missed opportunity, every disappointment felt like a thorn wrapped around her heart. She couldn't understand why her life felt so heavy when she was putting in so much effort. She was working hard, doing all the right things on the surface, yet nothing seemed to bloom the way she hoped. Then one morning, an old woman appeared at her garden gate and said something that cracked Elsie's world open. "Your flowers tell a story. Just as these plants grew from seeds you planted weeks ago, your life grows from the seeds of your thoughts." The truth hit her with startling clarity. Every bitter memory she nursed was a seed. Every moment of self-doubt was planting something in the invisible garden of her future. And the universe, in its impartial wisdom, was nurturing those seeds with the same dedication it would nurture seeds of hope or joy or possibility. This is the part that makes people uncomfortable when they first really grasp it. The universe doesn't discriminate between good thoughts and bad thoughts. It doesn't judge your mental seeds as worthy or unworthy. It simply provides the conditions for growth, nurturing whatever you plant with absolute equality. When you repeatedly think thoughts of limitation, you're planting seeds of limitation. When you dwell in resentment, you're cultivating more experiences that will give you reasons to resent. The harvest is always, inevitably, a perfect reflection of what was planted. But here's where it gets even more interesting. It's not just your thoughts, it's the words you speak that carry tremendous creative power. Words are thoughts given form, vibrations sent into the world that literally shape the field of possibilities around you. There was a merchant named Leonard who learned this lesson through the deterioration of everything he valued. His words had always been sharp, quick to criticize both others and himself. He prided himself on being honest, direct, unfiltered, but what he called honesty was often just cruelty, dressed up in noble language. His relationships withered like plants in drought. Customers would complete their transactions quickly and leave. Fellow merchants avoided his company. He told himself it was because people couldn't handle the truth, but deep down he felt the loneliness growing. Then someone introduced him to a practice that seemed almost too simple to be powerful: speaking words of kindness, first to himself, then to others. Every morning before leaving his home, he would say aloud, "I am worthy of love." It felt awkward at first, false even, but he committed to the practice. Then he began shifting how he spoke to others. Instead of pointing out flaws, he looked for things to appreciate. Instead of criticism, he offered encouragement. The transformation wasn't in other people, it was in him. And as his internal world shifted, his external world had no choice but to mirror that shift. Within months, everything changed. Customers lingered at his stall, drawn by something they couldn't quite name, but could definitely feel. Fellow merchants sought his company. The very air around him seemed different, charged with possibility and warmth. He hadn't changed his circumstances through force. He had changed the seeds he was planting with every word, every interaction, every thought. And the harvest that came from those new seeds was abundant beyond what he'd imagined. This reveals something crucial about the transformation journey you're on. You can't keep planting the same mental and verbal seeds and expect a different harvest. If you want your life to change, you have to change what you're planting right now, today, in this moment. The good news is that you have that power. Every single moment is a chance to plant new seeds. Every thought is a choice. Every word is a decision about what you're calling into your future. You're not a victim of your past plantings. You're the gardener who can choose what to plant next. Write in the comments, "I'm planting new seeds." If you're ready to change your harvest, there's a paradox at the heart of manifestation that trips up almost everyone who encounters it, and it has to do with the relationship between desire and attachment. You can want something deeply, passionately, completely, but the moment you grip that desire too tightly, the moment your wanting becomes desperate need, you actually push away the very thing you're trying to attract. It's like trying to hold water in a clenched fist. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. A woman named Mabel lived this paradox for years without understanding what was happening. She sat at her window each morning, watching life pass by while feeling completely stuck. She yearned for movement, for change, for the rushing waters of possibility she witnessed in other people's lives. And with each attempt to force progress, she found herself more deeply rooted in place. Her hands were folded in her lap, but inside she was gripping so tightly to how she thought life should unfold that she'd created an invisible prison around herself. One morning, as mist rose from the valley, an old woman appeared beneath her window and said something that would eventually set Mabel free. "The more you grip sand, the faster it slips through your fingers." The words echoed in Mabel's mind for days. She began to notice how her desperate hold on specific outcomes had become the very force holding her back. Every decision was weighted with the question, "Is this the right move?" Every opportunity was analyzed to death, examined for whether it fit her rigid picture of how things should be. The shift came when she finally learned to loosen her grip. Not to stop caring, not to abandon her desires, but to hold them more lightly. To stay open to how they might manifest, rather than demanding they show up in one specific form. And something remarkable happened. Opportunities that had been there all along suddenly became visible to her. Small at first, like droplets, but then streaming steadily as she allowed herself to be carried by life's momentum rather than constantly swimming against it. This principle of allowing, of flowing rather than forcing, shows up everywhere once you start looking for it. There was a merchant named Franklin whose entire identity was wrapped up in his trading business. He had built it from nothing, poured years of his life into it, and couldn't imagine himself doing anything else. So when it began to falter, his first instinct was to grip harder, work longer hours, push for more sales, force the old model to keep working, even as the market was shifting beneath him. But there was a quiet voice inside him, a subtle pull toward something different. People kept asking him to teach them what he knew, to share his expertise, and he kept dismissing it because it didn't fit his picture of who he was supposed to be. He was a merchant, not a teacher. Teaching felt like giving up, like admitting defeat, like abandoning the dream he'd worked so hard to build, until one day, exhausted and out of options, he finally listened to that subtle pull. He surrendered to the possibility that maybe life was trying to show him a new direction. He agreed to teach a small class on trading principles, and the moment he released his grip on how things had to be, doors began opening that he never imagined existed. His influence expanded beyond what it had been when he was just trading. His prosperity deepened because he was now helping others prosper. And perhaps most importantly, his joy multiplied because he'd found a way to contribute that felt more aligned with who he was becoming, not who he used to be. The transformation wasn't about giving up on what he wanted. Success, prosperity, meaningful work. It was about releasing his attachment to the specific form those things had to take. This is the subtle but crucial distinction that changes everything. You can hold a vision while remaining flexible about how it manifests. You can have clear intentions while staying open to paths you haven't considered. The universe often has better plans for you than you have for yourself, but you have to loosen your grip enough to let those plans unfold. Most people live their entire lives like Mabel did before her awakening, sitting at the window, watching opportunities pass by because those opportunities don't look exactly like what they'd imagined. Or they grip like Franklin did, trying to force an old model, to keep working when life is clearly guiding them toward something new. The invitation is always the same. Trust the current, loosen the grip, allow the flow. Your job isn't to control the river, it's to learn to navigate it with grace. Put in the comments, "I'm learning to flow," if this message is landing for you. What I'm about to share might be one of the most uncomfortable truths you'll encounter on this journey, but it's also one of the most liberating. Your outer world is a perfect mirror of your inner world. Not sometimes, not occasionally, but always. Every circumstance you find yourself in, every relationship you're part of, every financial situation you're experiencing, it's all reflecting back to you the beliefs and perceptions you hold about yourself and reality. This isn't about blame or judgment. It's about understanding the mechanism so you can consciously work with it instead of being its unconscious victim. There was a merchant named Harvey who embodied this principle. In the starkest way possible. Day after day, he stood before his empty stall in the bustling marketplace, watching other vendors thrive while his own business crumbled. Bitterness was etched across his weathered face. "The world conspires against me," he would mutter, seeing only obstacles and misfortune wherever he looked. And you know what? He was right, but not in the way he thought. The world wasn't conspiring against him. It was conspiring with him, mirroring back exactly the energy he was putting out. One morning, a wise woman approached his stall and did something simple but profound. She placed a mirror on his counter and asked, "What do you see?" Harvey looked at his reflection, the scowl, the tension, the defeat in his eyes. "I see failure," he replied, and she smiled knowingly. "Then that is what life will continue to show you." In that moment, something clicked. He began to understand that his outer circumstances weren't creating his inner state. His inner state was creating his outer circumstances. This is where the real work begins, and it's work that most people avoid because it requires something uncomfortable, taking full responsibility, not blaming yourself, not feeling guilty, but recognizing that you have far more power than you thought. If your outer world mirrors your inner world, then changing your outer world starts with changing what's happening inside. Harvey began noticing how his perception colored every interaction, every opportunity. He was so convinced of his failure that he interpreted everything through that lens, and that interpretation became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Gradually, he made a different choice. He straightened his posture, softened his expression, and began speaking with renewed confidence. Not fake confidence that tried to cover up doubt, but genuine confidence rooted in a shift in how he saw himself. Within weeks, customers were drawn to his stall, sensing the change in his energy even if they couldn't articulate. What was different? His outer world had transformed because his inner landscape had bloomed. This mirror principle operates at every level of your experience, including your physical body. There was a woman named Mildred who carried this truth in her cells. Chronic illness had plagued her for years, and she had spent those years viewing her body with criticism and blame. "Why are you failing me?" she would think, looking at herself with contempt. "What's wrong with you?" Her inner dialogue was a constant stream of judgment, and her body responded to that judgment by staying sick, not because it was punishing her, but because it was responding to the signals she was sending. When she discovered the mirror law, something fundamental shifted in her awareness. She began to understand that the way she spoke to herself, the way she viewed her own body, was creating a hostile internal environment. So she started a practice that felt almost radical in its simplicity, speaking words of love to her reflection. Each morning she would stand before the mirror, look deeply into her own eyes and whisper, "You are whole, you are healing, you are sacred." At first, it felt false, like she was lying to herself, but she persisted. As her inner dialogue transformed from contempt to compassion, from criticism to love, something remarkable happened. Vitality began returning. Symptoms that had been chronic started easing. Her natural radiance emerged from beneath years of self-imposed darkness. The healing wasn't about forcing her body to change through willpower. It was about changing her relationship with herself, and her body responded to that new frequency of self-love. This reveals something profound about the nature of transformation. You can't hate yourself into a better version of yourself. You can't criticize your way to improvement. The mirror of reality responds to the energy you're projecting, and when that energy is one of self-rejection, the mirror shows you more reasons to reject yourself. But when you shift to self-acceptance, to genuine appreciation for who you are right now, the mirror begins reflecting that back in ways that sometimes feel miraculous, but are actually just the natural operation of this universal law. Write in the comments, "I'm changing the mirror," if you're ready to shift your inner world. The relationship most people have with fear is one of the biggest obstacles standing between them and the life they're meant to live. We're taught from an early age that fear is something to be eliminated, conquered, or avoided at all costs. Success gurus tell you to face your fears, as if fear is an enemy to be defeated. But what if everything you've been taught about fear is backwards? What if fear isn't your enemy at all, but actually one of your most valuable guides? There was a merchant named Stanley who lived his entire adult life gripped by a fear so constant it colored every decision he made. Each morning he would wake with a heavy dread pressing on his chest, convinced that disaster lurked around every corner. His shop was prosperous, but he couldn't enjoy that prosperity because he was perpetually terrified of losing it. Every transaction felt fragile, every success temporary, every moment of peace just the calm before an inevitable storm. This fear cast long shadows across his days, dimming even his brightest achievements. One evening, as Stanley counted his earnings with trembling hands, an old sage appeared at his door and watched his anxious movements. Then the sage spoke words that would eventually change everything. "What you resist persists. Your fear is but a shadow cast by your own resistance to life's flow." Stanley didn't understand at first. He thought fear was something happening to him, not something he was creating through his relationship with uncertainty. But the sage's words planted a seed that would gradually grow into understanding. The truth is that fear exists not as your enemy, but as your teacher. When fear rises within you, it's pointing toward the very direction your spirit yearns to grow. Like a compass needle trembling before finding true north, fear signals the path to your expansion. Think about it. Every significant growth in your life has required you to move through fear, not around it. Every transformation has asked you to step into the unknown despite the fear, not to wait until the fear disappears. Your relationship with fear determines the boundaries of your existence. When you fight against it, fear grows stronger, feeding on your resistance. It becomes this monster in your mind, this insurmountable obstacle. But when you embrace fear as a natural signal of growth, when you understand it as simply your nervous system's response to stepping beyond the familiar, its power diminishes dramatically. It reveals itself as merely a shadow cast by your own light. And shadows can't exist without light. Stanley's breakthrough came when he stopped trying to eliminate his fear and instead began to acknowledge it with curiosity. Oh, there's fear. That must mean I'm growing. He started recognizing that the presence of fear wasn't evidence of danger, it was evidence of expansion. And that simple shift in perception changed everything. The fear didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling him. He could feel it and move forward anyway, and that's when his life truly began to flourish. In a distant village, a widow named Ida faced a similar journey, but from a different starting point. She had inherited her husband's failing business, and for the first few months she was completely paralyzed by fear of failure. Every decision felt impossible. Every day brought new worries about whether she could keep things afloat. She felt the weight of responsibility crushing her, and beneath that weight was a terror that kept her frozen in place. Then something shifted when she discovered that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing faith despite the fear. She created a morning practice that became her anchor. Standing in her shop before opening, she would speak aloud, "I choose faith over fear." Not as a way to make the fear disappear, but as a declaration of what she would follow. The fear was still there, but she stopped letting it make her decisions. Within weeks, something remarkable happened. Her shop began to prosper in ways that defied logic. Customers appeared, opportunities emerged, solutions to problems presented themselves. But the prosperity wasn't because the fear had vanished. It was because she had learned to walk alongside it without letting it drive. She discovered that you don't need to wait until you're fearless to take action. You just need to be willing to feel the fear and move forward anyway. This distinction is crucial for your own journey. You're not waiting to become someone who doesn't feel fear. You're learning to become someone who feels fear and acts with faith anyway. The fear is information, not instruction. It's telling you something is unfamiliar, something requires growth, something is outside your current comfort zone. But that doesn't mean it's wrong or dangerous. It just means it's new. Put in the comments, faith over fear, if you're ready to change your relationship with fear. Understanding these principles intellectually is one thing, but there's another layer that most people never quite grasp until they experience it directly. Your mind isn't just processing information or reacting to circumstances. It's actively cultivating reality like a garden. And just like a physical garden, what grows in your life depends entirely on what you're planting, watering, and nurturing with your attention. Most people go through life as unconscious gardeners, wondering why weeds keep appearing while never noticing they're the ones scattering those seeds. There was a woman named Clara who lived in a state of perpetual overwhelm. Her home, once a sanctuary, had become a tempest of scattered thoughts and unsettled emotions. She would lie awake at night, her mind racing through endless loops of worry, replaying conversations, imagining worst-case scenarios, jumping from one anxiety to the next without pause. She yearned for peace, but had no idea that peace wasn't something she needed to find out there. It was something she needed to cultivate in here, in the garden of her consciousness. One dawn, An old sage appeared at her door and spoke words that would reshape her entire understanding of how life works. Your inner world is a garden. Each thought you plant takes root. Each emotion you feed helps it grow. Clara looked around at the chaos of her life, the clutter, the stress, the constant sense of being pulled in 1,000 directions, and suddenly saw it all as the harvest of seeds she'd been unconsciously planting for years. Seeds of worry, seeds of doubt, seeds of what if and not enough, and something's wrong. The sage continued, "You possess within you a sacred garden, a place where every thought seeds itself into the soil of your consciousness, but you've forgotten your role as the master gardener of your mind." This truth hit Clara with the force of recognition. She had been letting her mental garden run wild, allowing any thought to take root, feeding anxieties with constant attention, while starving possibilities of the nourishment they needed to grow. So she began a practice that seemed simple, but proved transformative. Each morning, before the chaos of the day could take hold, she would sit quietly and consciously plant seeds. Seeds of harmony, seeds of peace, seeds of gratitude for the good already present. She would water these seeds with genuine feeling, with the emotional energy that makes thoughts become things. And gradually, her external world began to mirror this internal cultivation. The chaos didn't disappear overnight, but it started to organize itself naturally, like a garden coming into order under the care of an attentive gardener. This same principle played out in a completely different context through a factory supervisor named Gilbert. His workplace was a pressure cooker of tension, deadlines constantly looming, personalities clashing, problems multiplying faster than solutions. For years, Gilbert had approached this environment the way most people do, by trying to control the external chaos, managing people and situations with ever-increasing effort. It was exhausting, and it wasn't working. Then he discovered what Clara had learned. The outer world reflects the inner world with mathematical precision, so he began a morning practice that his colleagues would have found strange if they'd known about it. Before entering the factory each day, he would spend 10 minutes tending his inner garden. He would plant seeds of harmony, imagining smooth operations, respectful interactions, creative solutions. He would water these seeds with genuine appreciation for his colleagues, for the opportunity to contribute, for the challenges that helped him grow. The transformation that followed wasn't subtle. Within weeks, the atmosphere in the factory shifted in ways that seemed almost miraculous to those who didn't understand what was happening beneath the surface. Workplace tension that had been constant for years began dissolving. Operations that had been plagued with problems started running smoothly. Innovation emerged naturally, where before there had only been resistance and complaint. Gilbert hadn't changed his external circumstances through force. He had cultivated a different internal environment, and the external world reorganized itself to match. This is the revelation that changes everything once you truly internalize it. You're not a victim of your environment, you're the gardener of your experience. Every thought you think is a seed, every emotion you feed is water and sunlight determining what grows. Every belief you hold is the soil condition that determines what can take root, and the harvest, your actual lived experience, is the inevitable result of what you've been planting and tending in the garden of your consciousness. Most people spend their entire lives pulling at weeds while continuing to scatter weed seeds. They want different results, but keep cultivating the same thoughts. They desire peace, but fertilize anxiety with constant attention. They long for abundance, but water seeds of scarcity with their words and worries. The shift available to you right now is becoming a conscious gardener instead of an unconscious one. Write in the comments, "I'm tending my garden," if you're ready to cultivate consciously. There's a particular aspect of this whole process that most people find the hardest to embrace, and it's also the most powerful. It's the practice of gratitude, not as a response to what you've received, but as the very mechanism that opens the door to receiving. Most people have gratitude backwards. They think gratitude is what you feel after something good happens, a polite thank you note to the universe for delivering what you wanted. But that's not how gratitude actually works in the mechanics of manifestation. True gratitude, the kind that shifts reality, comes before the evidence appears. There was a merchant named Eugene who spent years standing before the locked doors of his deepest desires. He had accumulated what he thought were all the right keys: hard work, cleverness, strategic connections, persistence. He would try each key in turn, forcing them into locks that refused to open, convinced that if he just worked harder, strategized better, networked more effectively, eventually something would give. But night after night, he returned home empty-handed, exhausted from pushing against doors that remained stubbornly sealed. One morning he encountered an ancient locksmith whose eyes held the weight of centuries of wisdom. The old man watched Eugene fumbling with his ring of keys and said something that initially made no sense. "The master key you seek is gratitude." Eugene was confused. Gratitude? How could being thankful for what he didn't have possibly help him get it? That seemed like giving up, like settling, like accepting less than what he wanted. But the locksmith explained something that would change Eugene's entire approach to life. When you stand before the locked doors of your desires and offer genuine gratitude before they open, you're not just being optimistic or practicing positive thinking. You're actually aligning with the creative force that shapes reality. Gratitude is a frequency, a vibration that tells the universe, "I'm already in the state of having received." And when you broadcast that frequency authentically, reality has no choice but to match it. It's not about tricking yourself or pretending something exists when it doesn't. It's about understanding that in the quantum field of infinite possibilities, your desires already exist in potential form, and gratitude is the key that collapses that potential into actual experience. Eugene decided to try this approach, though every logical part of his mind resisted. He began offering thanks for the abundance he couldn't yet see, for the opportunities that hadn't yet materialized, for the success that was still invisible. And something shifted in him. The desperate energy that had been pushing doors closed transformed into a magnetic energy that drew opportunities toward him. Within weeks, doors that had been locked for years began opening effortlessly, not because he'd found better keys, but because he'd finally found the master key that opens everything. In another part of the world, a woman named Dorothy discovered this same truth during a period of profound lack. Her cupboards were bare, her resources depleted, every visible indicator screaming scarcity. Everything in her circumstances told her she had nothing to be grateful for, and that's exactly when she made the decision that would transform everything. Despite having no evidence to support it, she began each morning thanking the universe for overflow, for abundance, for more than enough. It felt awkward at first, almost dishonest. How could she thank for what she didn't have? But she persisted in the practice, and something remarkable happened. Her energy field began shifting from one of desperate lack to one of grateful receptivity. She wasn't denying her current reality. She was choosing to align with a different frequency. And the universe, responding to that frequency shift with its characteristic precision, began rearranging circumstances to match her new vibration. Within days, not weeks or months but days, unexpected opportunities emerged. A forgotten debt was suddenly repaid. A client spontaneously doubled their order. A relative showed up with surprise abundance they felt compelled to share. Dorothy hadn't manipulated these situations into existence through force. She had simply shifted her vibration through gratitude, and the matching experiences were drawn into her field, like iron filings to a magnet. This reveals something crucial about how manifestation actually operates. The universe doesn't respond to your words or your wishes. It responds to your vibration, your energetic frequency. And gratitude is one of the highest frequencies you can embody. When you're genuinely grateful, you're in a state of fullness, not emptiness. You're broadcasting "I have," not "I lack." And that broadcast signal is what the universe matches with corresponding experiences. The practice isn't about faking it or forcing yourself to feel grateful when you're actually bitter. It's about finding genuine appreciation for what is present right now, then extending that appreciation toward what's coming. It's about understanding that gratitude offered in advance is the key that unlocks channels through which your desires can flow. Write in the comments, "Thank you for what's coming," if you're ready to use this. Master Key. The invisible boundaries that constrain most people's lives aren't created by external circumstances. They're drawn by belief. You've been walking around with an invisible fence defining what's possible for you, and the shocking truth is that you built that fence yourself, brick by brick, with every limiting belief you've accepted as truth. The moment you realize this, the moment you truly understand that the limitations you experience are self-imposed, everything becomes available to you. But getting to that realization requires seeing beyond the conditioning that's been layered onto you since childhood. There was a woodcarver named Alfred who lived his entire life within boundaries he never questioned. Each day he carved the same designs his father had made and his grandfather before him. His hands were skilled, his work was beautiful, but his spirit felt confined by invisible walls he couldn't name. He would gaze at distant mountains and sense something more calling to him, yet he believed himself bound by the limits of his inheritance. This is what we all do. We inherit limitations from our family, our culture, our past experiences, and we mistake those inherited boundaries for universal laws. One afternoon, a wandering artisan passed through Alfred's village carrying sculptures that seemed to defy the very nature of wood. These pieces appeared to capture light itself, dancing with possibilities Alfred had never imagined wood could express. He was mesmerized and humbled at the same time. "How did you learn to create such wonders?" Alfred asked, expecting to hear about years of specialized training or secret techniques passed down through generations. But the artisan's answer was far simpler and far more profound. "I didn't learn anything special. I simply stopped believing in limitations." That single sentence cracked open Alfred's world. He had been limiting himself not because of lack of skill or resources, but because of lack of vision. He'd been operating within a paradigm of "this is how it's done," without ever questioning whether it had to be done that way. The wood hadn't been limiting him. His beliefs about what was possible with wood had been limiting him. And the moment he released those beliefs, his hands discovered capabilities they'd possessed all along, but had never been allowed to express. This is the hidden truth about limitations. They're almost always self-imposed. Your current circumstances are not walls, they're windows. Through them, you glimpse what you've allowed yourself to see. But change the window, expand it, remove it entirely, and suddenly the whole world opens before you. The universe operates through infinite possibility, not scarcity. Every limitation you perceive is a belief you're holding, not a reality you're stuck with. Consider a woman named Birdie, who dreamed of opening a flower shop in her neighborhood. She planned carefully, thinking only of what seemed realistic. A small space, modest. Inventory, local customers. She had the whole thing mapped out in her mind, contained, manageable, safe. But one morning, while arranging wildflowers in her garden, she allowed herself to imagine something different. What if her simple shop could become more than just a place to buy flowers? What if it could be a sanctuary of beauty? What if her arrangements could grace celebrations across the entire city? What if her passion could inspire others to discover their own creative gifts? As Birdie's vision expanded, Something miraculous began happening. The universe started orchestrating alignments she never could have planned. A retiring florist offered her a prime location she couldn't have afforded through normal channels. A wedding planner discovered her unique style at exactly the right moment. Soon her work was adorning grand hotels and touching lives she'd never dreamed of reaching. Her success grew exponentially, not because she suddenly worked harder or got luckier, but because she dared to believe in a bigger possibility. The size of your vision matters less than your willingness to let it grow beyond what seems reasonable. Most people keep their dreams small and manageable because they're afraid of disappointment. They'd rather achieve a small goal than risk reaching for something grand and falling short. But this approach misses the fundamental truth. The universe responds to the magnitude of your belief, not the modesty of your goals. When you think small, you get small. When you allow yourself to envision something that seems almost absurdly large, you activate forces that can actually deliver it. Your current situation isn't your ceiling, it's your floor. What you see as your limits are actually just the edges of your current awareness, and awareness can expand infinitely. The question isn't whether bigger things are possible for you, they absolutely are. The question is whether you're willing to release your grip on what seems realistic and reach for what feels impossible. Because impossible is just a word people use for things they haven't seen someone do yet. Write in the comments, "I'm expanding my vision," if you're ready to dream bigger. Now I want to explore one of the most challenging lessons on this entire journey, and it's the one that tests your trust more than any other. It has to do with timing, control, and the illusion that you can micromanage the universe into delivering results on your schedule. We live in a world obsessed with efficiency, deadlines, and instant gratification. Everything is supposed to happen now, immediately according to plan, and when life doesn't cooperate with our timetables, we interpret it as failure or resistance, rather than recognizing it for what it actually is. Divine timing operating on a schedule we can't see from our limited perspective. There was a woman named Agnes who embodied this struggle in the most visceral way. She clutched her timepiece like it was a sacred object, measuring each moment against her carefully constructed plans. From sunrise to sunset, she orchestrated her life like a conductor demanding perfect tempo from an orchestra. Each delay caused her spirit to tighten like a clenched fist. Each setback felt like a personal failure. Her determination to control time's flow left her exhausted, yet success remained frustratingly elusive, always just beyond her grasp, no matter how precisely she planned. What Agnes didn't understand, what most people don't understand, is that the universe operates on its own divine schedule, moving with a wisdom that transcends mortal comprehension. When you attempt to force its hand, when you insist that things must happen according to your timeline, you actually create resistance that blocks the natural flow of abundance. It's like trying to make a flower bloom faster by pulling on its petals. You don't accelerate the process, you damage it. The breakthrough for Agnes came not through more planning or better time management, but through complete exhaustion. She reached a point where she simply couldn't hold on anymore, where the effort of controlling every variable became too heavy to carry. And in that moment of surrender, something shifted. She began to notice how her insistence on controlling timing had been strangling possibility. She'd been so focused on making things happen when she decided they should happen that she'd been blind to opportunities arriving in unexpected moments. When she finally released her grip on the clock, when she stopped demanding that the universe dance to her tempo, everything changed. Opportunities that had been trying to reach her suddenly became visible. Connections formed with an ease she'd never experienced. Success began flowing, not because she'd finally figured out the right timing, but because she'd stopped fighting against the timing that was already perfect. This principle showed up differently, but just as powerfully, in the life of a businessman named Jasper. His ventures had always felt like battles. Every deal required force, every opportunity demanded aggressive pursuit, every day stretched him thin with stress. He was the embodiment of hustle culture, believing that success required constant pushing, perpetual effort, never-ending strategizing. And for a while this approach seemed to work, or at least it produced results. But beneath those results was a grinding exhaustion that was slowly destroying him from the inside out. Then, exhaustion brought him to his knees and forced him into stillness. Not the productive kind of stillness, where you're resting so you can push harder tomorrow, but genuine stillness where you stop pushing altogether. And in that stillness, Jasper discovered something that contradicted everything he'd been taught about success. It flows more freely when you cease trying to control its arrival. The deals he'd been chasing with desperate energy started appearing naturally when he allowed space. Between his actions, the connections he'd been forcing started forming organically when he released his grip on how they had to happen. Jasper learned that there's a profound difference between inspired action and forced action. Inspired action feels like flowing with the current. Forced action feels like swimming upstream. Both involve movement, but one works with universal forces while the other exhausts itself fighting against them. His business actually grew more successful when he decreased his resistance, when he learned to trust the timing of things rather than demanding they conform to his schedule. This is the paradox that confounds the logical mind but reveals itself as truth through experience. The less you try to control when things happen, the more perfectly they unfold. Divine timing isn't about things taking longer than you want. It's about things arriving exactly when they'll serve you best, even if that timing makes no sense to your limited human perspective. Your role isn't to dictate the schedule. Your role is to stay aligned with your vision while remaining open to the universe's choreography of when and how it manifests. Write in the comments, "I release control over timing," if this is speaking to where you are right now. There's a particular challenge facing people today that didn't exist in previous generations, and it's creating a crisis of disconnection from the very source of wisdom that could guide them. We live in an age of constant noise, perpetual stimulation, endless streams of information demanding our attention every single moment. Your mind is being pulled in 1,000 directions simultaneously, and in that fragmentation, you lose access to the one voice that actually knows the way forward, the quiet voice of your own inner guidance. There was a woman named Edith who lived in the heart of a bustling city where motion never ceased. Her days became a blur of activity. Messages to answer, meetings to attend, information to process, decisions to make. She scattered her energy like seeds thrown into the wind, never landing anywhere long enough to take root. Her intentions were pure, her efforts genuine, but everything felt fragmented, disconnected, like she was running faster and faster while somehow getting nowhere at all. What Edith didn't realize was that she'd lost the ability to hear. Not her physical hearing, but the deeper listening that connects you to universal intelligence. The universe speaks in whispers, not shouts. Its guidance arrives not through dramatic signs or thundering voices, but through subtle intuitions, gentle nudges, quiet knowings that arise only in the space between thoughts. And Edith had no space between thoughts. Her mind had become like a radio stuck between stations, picking up nothing but static because she was never still enough to tune into any clear signal. The transformation began when she accidentally discovered stillness, not through some grand spiritual practice, but through sheer exhaustion. One evening her devices all died at once, phone, laptop, everything, and rather than immediately rushing to charge them, she just sat. For the first time in months, maybe years, she sat in complete silence with nothing to do, nowhere to be, no information to consume. And in that silence, something extraordinary happened. Her mind, given permission to finally rest, began to settle like sediment in disturbed water, gradually sinking to the bottom. As the mental chatter quieted, a clarity emerged that she'd forgotten was possible. Answers to questions she'd been wrestling with for months suddenly became obvious. Decisions that had felt impossible to make revealed their right path. The overwhelm that had been crushing her began to dissolve, not because her circumstances changed, but because she could finally see them clearly, instead of through the fog of constant mental activity. She realized that stillness isn't the absence of productivity. It's the foundation of aligned action. In another city, a man named Roscoe embodied a different version of this same struggle. His life was overflowing with opportunity, too many opportunities, actually. Investors wanted his attention, partners proposed ventures, doors kept opening in every direction. To an outside observer, he had it all. But inside, Roscoe felt profoundly empty. He was succeeding by every external measure, while experiencing a hollowness that grew larger with each new achievement. Something was fundamentally off, but he couldn't figure out what, because he never stopped moving long enough to truly feel it. The shift came when he began dedicating mornings to silence. Not meditation in the formal sense, just sitting quietly before the day's demands could take hold. In those moments of stillness, he discovered something he'd lost in all the activity, an inner compass, a sense of true north that had been there all along but drowned out by noise. This compass didn't point toward the most lucrative opportunities or the most impressive achievements. It pointed toward what actually aligned with his deepest values, with who he truly was beneath all the doing and achieving. Armed with this clarity, Roscoe began making different choices. He turned down opportunities that looked great on paper but felt wrong in his gut. He pursued directions that made less logical sense but resonated with that inner knowing, and his life transformed in ways that surprised him. The success he'd been chasing exhaustively began arriving effortlessly. The fulfillment he'd been missing appeared naturally. Not because he was working harder, but because his actions were finally flowing from clarity rather than confusion, from alignment rather than desperation. This reveals something crucial about how manifestation actually works in practice. You can take all the right actions, apply all the right techniques, visualize perfectly, and affirm constantly. But if those actions arise from a scattered, unclear state, they'll produce scattered, unclear results. True power comes not from constant activity, but from aligned action. And alignment only emerges in stillness. In those moments when you stop doing long enough to remember who you actually are and what you're truly here to create. The invitation isn't to stop taking action or to withdraw from life. It's to create space within the action, to find pockets of stillness that allow you to reconnect with the intelligence guiding you. Even 5 minutes of genuine silence can recalibrate your entire day, tuning you back into the frequency of your authentic path. Write in the comments, "I'm creating space for stillness," if you recognize the need for this in your life. What emerges from stillness is something most people have been trained to ignore, dismiss, or rationalize away. It's that subtle knowing, that quiet whisper that arises from somewhere deeper than your thinking mind. Some call it intuition, others call it inner guidance. But whatever name you give it, it's the most reliable navigation system you possess. The problem is that we live in a culture that worships logic, data, and rational decision-making while treating intuition like some mystical nonsense that can't be trusted. But here's what nobody tells you. Your intuition is actually accessing information your logical mind can't perceive. There was a young merchant named Oscar who wandered through bustling marketplaces, feeling profoundly lost despite being surrounded by opportunity. He had all the information he needed: which products were selling, which routes were profitable, which strategies the successful merchants employed. Yet none of it felt right. He'd set up his stall in different locations, try different approaches, follow the advice of experienced traders, but something was always off. The confusion grew heavier with each passing day until he felt paralyzed by the noise of conflicting opinions and strategies. One afternoon, seeking refuge from the chaos, Oscar climbed the quiet hills above the city. Up there, away from the clamor and advice and endless options, something shifted. In that silence, a soft voice emerged from within. Not an audible voice, but an unmistakable knowing. Go east. There's a small village. Your people are there. It made absolutely no logical sense. That village was tiny, hardly profitable, not where any experienced merchant would suggest setting up. But the feeling was so clear, so certain, that, despite every rational objection his mind raised, Oscar decided to trust it. When he arrived in that eastern village, everything he'd been searching for fell into place. The people there had been waiting for exactly what he offered. His goods met needs that weren't being served. Connections formed naturally, business flourished, and Oscar finally understood what had been missing. He'd been following everyone else's logic instead of his own inner compass. Your soul knows things your mind can't. Calculate? It perceives patterns and possibilities that don't show up in data or rational analysis. The challenge is developing the courage to follow it, even when, especially when, it contradicts what seems logical. This same principle revealed itself in the life of a teacher named Nettie, who felt trapped in a life that looked successful on paper, but felt increasingly hollow from the inside. She taught well. Her students respected her. She had security and routine, but her heart kept whispering about something else, something she couldn't quite name. She'd feel these gentle nudges to write, to share stories, to express something that wanted to come through her. And she'd dismiss these promptings as impractical fantasies, telling herself to be realistic, to stick with what made sense. Then she started doing something simple but transformative. She began noting these gentle nudges in a journal instead of dismissing them. Write for 10 minutes today. Share that story with a friend. Submit something anywhere. Each prompting felt small, almost insignificant, but she committed to honoring them even when they made no logical sense. And as she followed each small inspiration, her path began illuminating itself, one step at a time. She couldn't see the whole journey. She didn't need to. Each step she took in trust revealed the next step. Within a year, Nettie's written words were reaching thousands of people. Her stories were touching lives, opening hearts, creating impact in ways her logical mind could never have planned or predicted. The path hadn't been laid out in advance. It emerged as she walked it, trusting those subtle promptings that felt right even when they seemed illogical. This is how authentic success unfolds. Not through forcing outcomes according to predetermined plans, but through following the thread of your own inner knowing wherever it leads. Most people spend their entire lives ignoring these whispers because they can't justify them rationally. They wait. For logical reasons, for guarantees, for evidence that following their intuition will work out. But intuition doesn't work that way. It asks you to trust before you have proof, to follow before you can see where it leads, to act on knowing that can't be explained in terms that satisfy the analytical mind. And that's exactly what makes it so powerful. It's accessing intelligence beyond the limitations of rational thought. Your soul's compass has been guiding you all along. Those feelings of rightness or wrongness about certain decisions, those unexpected urges to reach out to someone or explore something new, those quiet knowings that arise in moments of stillness, they're not random. They're your inner navigation system attempting to steer you toward your highest path. The question is whether you're willing to listen and, more importantly, whether you're willing to follow even when it doesn't make logical sense. Write in the comments, "I'm learning to trust my intuition," if you're Hearing these whispers in your own life, understanding these principles is one thing when life is flowing smoothly, but the real test comes when everything seems to be falling apart, when chaos arrives, when storms gather, when what you've built appears to be crumbling. That's when most people abandon everything they've learned and fall back into fear, resistance, and the belief that the universe has turned against them. But this is precisely when these truths matter most, when you need to. Remember that destruction is often the universe's way of clearing space for something better than you could have imagined. There was a merchant's daughter named Florence who lived in dread of storm season. Every year, as dark clouds gathered over her father's fields, she would feel anxiety tightening around her chest like a vice. Each thunderclap felt like a threat. Each gust of wind seemed to promise devastation. She saw only destruction in these tempests, convinced they existed solely to ruin what her family had worked so hard to build. Her fear of storms colored her entire approach to life, always bracing for disaster, always anticipating loss, always believing that nature was her enemy. Then one morning, after a particularly fierce storm had torn through their land, Florence walked the fields expecting to find complete devastation. And she did find damage, certainly. But as she looked more closely, something remarkable revealed itself. Where lightning had struck, minerals from deep within the earth had risen to the surface, enriching soil that had been depleted. The strong winds had carried seeds from distant meadows, introducing new plant varieties that would actually strengthen their crops. The torrential rain had carved new channels that would better nourish the land during dry seasons. The storm hadn't just destroyed, it had simultaneously renewed, redistributed, and prepared. This revelation transformed how Florence perceived challenges. She began to understand that within every storm lies a hidden blessing, that what appears as chaos often serves as nature's and the universe's way of clearing space for new growth. The destruction isn't punishment or bad luck. It's recalibration, reorganization, preparation for something the old structure couldn't accommodate. Your resistance to these storms doesn't protect you, it just makes the experience more painful. But when you can trust that even destruction serves your evolution, you stop fighting against life's natural cycles of death and rebirth. This same truth revealed itself even more dramatically in the life of a craftsman named Warren. He had built his workshop with his own hands years earlier, and it had become more than just a workplace. It was part of his identity, a symbol of his independence and skill. Then one night, a severe storm swept through and collapsed the entire structure. When Warren saw the wreckage the next morning, every part of him wanted to rage against the injustice, to curse his fate, to see this as tragedy. But something deeper within him chose differently. Instead of immediately succumbing to despair or anger, he chose trust. He chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, this apparent disaster was actually serving him in ways he couldn't yet see. And as he began clearing the debris, that trust was validated in the most unexpected way. The storm had revealed that the foundation of his original workshop had been slowly deteriorating. Had the building remained standing, it would have eventually collapsed under different circumstances, possibly while he was working inside, which could have been catastrophic. The insurance settlement from the storm damage allowed Warren to rebuild with a proper foundation, and the new workshop he constructed was larger, better designed, and capable of accommodating an expansion of his business that the old building never could have housed. What had looked like destruction was actually protection and preparation combined. The universe had removed something that was no longer serving him, that was actually becoming dangerous, and created space for something better to emerge. This is the perspective shift that changes everything when you're going through your own storms. What if that job loss is protecting you from a company that's about to fail? What if that relationship ending is clearing space for a connection that actually aligns with who you're becoming? What if that health crisis is forcing you to finally address patterns that would have caused worse problems later? What if that financial setback is redirecting you toward opportunities your old mindset would have missed? The storms in your life aren't evidence that you're doing something wrong or that the universe has abandoned you. They're often evidence that you're being recalibrated, that old structures that no longer serve your highest good are being cleared away, that space is being created for something new to emerge. Your job isn't to prevent all storms. That's impossible. Your job is to trust the intelligence guiding the storm, even when you can't see what it's preparing you for. Write in the comments, "I trust the storms," if you're learning to see challenges differently. There's a particular area of life where these principles show up with painful clarity, and it's the arena that causes more suffering than almost any other: love and relationships. People spend their entire lives seeking connection, validation, and affection from others, while completely neglecting the one relationship that determines all the others, the relationship they have with themselves. The outer world doesn't just mirror your beliefs about reality in general, it mirrors with excruciating precision how you treat yourself internally. There was a woman named Myrtle who spent her days weaving tapestries of exquisite beauty, her hands creating art that others treasured. Yet her heart remained painfully empty. Each thread she wove seemed to echo her loneliness as she watched others find love while she remained alone, wondering what invisible flaw kept her isolated. Night after night, she would gaze at her reflection in the village well, asking that ancient question, "What's wrong with me? Why am I not enough?" And there it was, the very belief creating her isolation. When you look at yourself and see insufficiency, when your internal dialogue is a constant stream of self-criticism and doubt, you're broadcasting a frequency that others unconsciously pick up. You can't hide how you feel about yourself. It emanates from you like a scent, invisible but unmistakable. And when that signal says, "I'm not worthy of love," the universe mirrors that belief back to you by creating circumstances where love remains elusive. The shift for Myrtle came not through finding someone else, but through finding herself. She began treating herself the way she'd always hoped someone else would treat her. She adorned her hair with flowers, not because anyone would see, but because she deserved beauty. She celebrated her accomplishments, not because anyone was watching, but because her achievements mattered. She spoke to herself with the tenderness she'd been reserving for a partner who hadn't arrived. And as this relationship with herself deepened, something remarkable happened. Neighbors who had barely noticed her before began seeking her company, drawn by a warmth radiating from within her that hadn't been there before. Leonard, a quiet sculptor from a neighboring village, found himself inexplicably pulled to her presence. The love she had cultivated within herself had created a magnetic field that attracted corresponding energy from without. She hadn't changed her circumstances through manipulation or strategy. She had simply filled herself with the love she'd been desperately seeking elsewhere, and external love arrived to match that internal fullness. This reveals one of the most profound paradoxes of manifestation. You cannot attract what you're not already embodying. If you want love but feel fundamentally unlovable, those frequencies are contradictory, and the universe will match the deeper frequency, the one you actually believe, not the one you're hoping for. Leonard himself embodied this principle from a different angle. He was a sculptor whose hands shaped stone into forms of remarkable grace. Yet he treated his own spirit with harsh judgment that would make stone seem soft by comparison. For years, Leonard measured his worth by external achievements, while his internal dialogue remained brutal. Not good enough. Should be better. What's wrong with you? He wondered why his relationships remained shallow, why people seemed to keep him at arm's length despite his talent and success. What he didn't realize was that the way he treated himself internally was creating an energetic barrier that others could feel even if they couldn't name it. His self-judgment created a frequency of unworthiness that repelled the very connection he craved. The transformation came when Leonard finally began extending to himself the compassion he'd been withholding. He started listening to his inner wisdom instead of constantly overriding it. He honored his needs instead of dismissing them as weakness. He spoke to himself with gentleness instead of cruelty. And as this internal relationship shifted from hostility to love, his external relationships transformed in ways that seemed almost magical, but were simply the natural operation of the mirror principle. People began seeking deeper connection with him. His relationships naturally evolved from surface-level interactions to genuine intimacy. Love that had felt perpetually out of reach suddenly flowed toward him effortlessly. The change wasn't in other people, it was in the frequency he was broadcasting through his transformed relationship with himself. This is the foundation that most people skip over in their pursuit of love, success, or any external validation. They're trying to get from the outside what can only be generated from within. Your relationship with yourself sets the template for every other relationship in your life. When you treat yourself with criticism, you'll attract critics. When you treat yourself with neglect, you'll attract people who neglect you. When you treat yourself with love, you become a magnet for love. It's not metaphorical, it's energetic mechanics. Write in the comments, "I'm filling myself first," if you're ready to shift this foundation. What we've been circling around throughout this entire journey comes down to one fundamental principle that most people fundamentally misunderstand: belief. Not hope, not wishing, not positive thinking, but genuine belief. The kind of certainty that exists so deeply within you that it doesn't need external validation to remain intact. This is the bridge between the invisible realm of possibility and the visible realm of manifestation. Without this bridge, your dreams remain forever on the other side of an uncrossable chasm, visible but untouchable, tantalizing but unreachable. There was a laundress named Beatrice who spent her days washing linens for wealthy families, her hands rough from years of labor in cold water. Each morning, she would watch the sun rise over the grand manor house where she worked, its golden light illuminating possibilities that seemed meant for others, but never for her. She had dreams, certainly. Who doesn't? She envisioned owning her own shop in the village square, becoming something more than she currently was. But those dreams felt like fairy tales, pleasant fantasies to occupy her mind during repetitive work, but nothing that could actually materialize. "Such things are not meant for someone like me," she would whisper to herself, and in that whisper lived the very barrier keeping her dreams at a distance. One dawn, as she carried her basket of linens, she encountered a wandering sage sitting beneath an old oak tree. The sage watched her downcast eyes and called out with words that would eventually crack her world open. "What separates the acorn from the oak is not time, but trust in its own becoming." Beatrice stopped, confused by this simple statement that somehow felt profound. The sage explained that thought becomes form through the bridge of belief, that her dreams weren't impossibilities reserved for others. They were potentials waiting for her conviction to call them forth. Like an acorn, containing within it the full blueprint of a mighty oak, her dreams already existed in seed form. They required only the fertile soil of unwavering faith to grow from invisible potential into visible reality. This understanding represents the actual mechanism of manifestation that most people never grasp. They confuse wanting with believing. They mistake hoping for knowing. They think affirmations and visualizations are enough, while their deeper consciousness screams doubt. But the universe doesn't respond to your words or even your actions. It responds to your actual beliefs, the ones you hold so deeply you don't even question them. When you truly believe something is yours, not with desperate hope but with calm certainty, reality reorganizes itself to match that conviction. In a distant city lived a man named Virgil, who understood this principle at a cellular level. For 7 years he held an unwavering vision of creating a healing garden where people could find peace and restoration. When he began, he had only a small plot of barren land and minimal resources. Every practical voice around him said it was impossible, that he should be realistic, that dreams don't feed families or pay bills. But Virgil possessed something more powerful than practicality. He possessed unshakable faith. Each day he walked his modest plot of land, not seeing what was, but seeing through belief's eyes what would become. He tended his vision as carefully as he tended his first seeds, protecting it from the weeds of doubt, watering it with daily conviction, giving it the light of his constant attention. People questioned his dedication to what seemed impossible. Friends worried about his sanity. But Virgil knew something they didn't. Doubt cannot cross the bridge of faith. Doubt stops at the edge, unable to follow you when you're walking on the solid ground of genuine belief. As seasons passed, something remarkable began unfolding. Benefactors appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, offering resources. Skilled gardeners arrived, drawn by something they couldn't quite name but definitely felt. Materials manifested, opportunities emerged, and slowly, year by year, the barren plot transformed into the lush sanctuary Virgil had seen so clearly in his mind's eye from the very beginning. His healing garden became reality, not because he got lucky or because circumstances miraculously aligned, but because his unwavering belief built a bridge strong enough for his vision to walk across from the invisible into the visible. This is the distinction between people who manifest their dreams and people who spend their lives wishing for them. The wishers hope their dreams might somehow materialize while simultaneously believing they won't. The manifestors hold their visions with such unshakable conviction that the universe has no choice but to match that frequency with corresponding circumstances. Faith isn't blind optimism. It's the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. It's the bridge itself. Write in the comments, "My belief builds the bridge," if you're ready to cross from dreaming to creating. There's a dimension to all of this that most people completely overlook, and it has to do with the power of your actual voice, not just your thoughts, not just your silent intentions, but the physical act of speaking words aloud into the air around you. We've talked about thoughts as seeds, beliefs as bridges, but there's something uniquely powerful about giving voice to your truth that activates forces in ways silent thinking simply cannot. Sound is vibration, and vibration is the fundamental language of the universe itself. In a small apartment above a bustling marketplace lived a woman named Sylvia, who felt the walls closing in around her with each passing day. Her life had become a cage of circumstances, bills mounting, opportunities dwindling, dreams gathering dust in corners she no longer looked at. Each morning she would wake to that familiar weight pressing on her chest, and her thoughts would spiral immediately into the same patterns of limitation and resignation. "This is all there is," her mind would whisper, and her reality would echo that frequency back to her with depressing consistency. Then something shifted when she encountered a teaching that seemed almost too simple to be powerful. Speak your gratitude aloud. Not just think it, not just feel it privately, but actually give it voice. At first, Sylvia felt foolish standing alone in her small room, speaking to empty air. But she committed to the practice anyway, beginning each morning by voicing appreciation for the simplest things. "I am thankful for this breath. I am grateful for this moment. I am blessed by this new day." Her voice felt shaky at first, uncertain, like she was pretending. But she continued. Something remarkable began happening that had nothing to do with positive thinking or psychology. When you speak words aloud, you're not just expressing thoughts, you're creating actual sound waves that travel through your body and the space around you. These waves carry specific frequencies that literally adjust your cellular vibration. This isn't metaphor or wishful thinking. It's physics. Every cell in your body responds to the sound of your voice, and when that voice carries gratitude, appreciation, or affirmation, those cells begin resonating at a higher frequency. As Sylvia continued her practice of voiced gratitude, she noticed her energy shifting in ways that felt physical, not just mental. Her body felt lighter, her breath came easier. The heaviness that had been her constant companion began lifting, and as her internal frequency rose, her external circumstances started reorganizing themselves to match. Her small room that had felt like a prison began filling with unexpected abundance. Opportunities appeared, connections formed, solutions to long-standing problems emerged, seemingly out of nowhere. The walls weren't closing in anymore because her voiced gratitude had literally expanded her energetic field. Across the city, a bookshop owner named Archibald had discovered this same principle, but taken it even further. Each morning before opening his shop, he would stand in his small garden and sing his affirmations into the dawn. Not just speak them, but actually sing them, letting his voice rise and fall with genuine feeling. I am blessed beyond measure. Abundance flows to me freely. Joy surrounds me like sunshine. His neighbors might have thought him eccentric, but Archibald understood something profound about the power of the human voice as an instrument of manifestation. When you sing, you engage your entire body in the creation of sound. Your breath deepens, your diaphragm engages, your chest cavity becomes a resonance chamber. The vibrations don't just travel outward. They reverberate through every system in your body, adjusting your nervous system, shifting your biochemistry, tuning your entire being like an instrument, finding its perfect pitch. Archibald's morning songs weren't just affirmations. They were tuning fork sessions, adjusting the frequency of his entire existence to align with the reality he was claiming. Within months, his modest bookshop began flourishing in ways that defied conventional business logic. Opportunities appeared as if literally summoned by his vocal practice. New customers would walk in saying they felt drawn to his shop, without knowing why. Partnerships formed with synchronistic timing. His voiced gratitude and sung affirmations had created a vibrational field so strong that matching circumstances were pulled into his orbit like metal to a magnet. This reveals something crucial about manifestation that thinking alone cannot achieve. When you voice your truth, you're not just processing information mentally, you're engaging your physical body as an instrument of creation. Your vocal cords vibrate, your breath moves, your cells respond. The air around you carries those vibrations outward. You become a living broadcast tower, and the frequency you're broadcasting through your voice becomes the signal the universe matches with corresponding experiences. Put in the comments, I give voice to my truth, if you're ready to speak your reality into being. As we approach the culmination of this journey, there's one final integration that brings everything together. The marriage of focused intention with natural flow. Most people live at one extreme or the other, either scattering their energy in every direction without clear focus, or forcing their will so rigidly that they strangle possibility. The mastery lies in holding clear intention while remaining fluid in how that intention manifests, like a river that knows its destination yet flows around whatever obstacles appear in its path. There was a wanderer named Horus who embodied the first extreme perfectly. Each morning he would set out in different directions, seeking purpose but finding only confusion. His steps meandered without aim, much like his thoughts that scattered like leaves in autumn wind. Some villagers offered him work in their fields, others in their shops, but nothing called to his spirit. He was everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, his energy dispersed so widely that nothing could take root or gather momentum. One evening, as darkness approached and Horus felt more lost than ever, he noticed an old lantern maker carefully crafting his wares with extraordinary precision. Each beam of light from the finished lanterns cut through shadow with perfect clarity, illuminating specific paths while leaving others in darkness. Horus, curious about this focused craftsmanship, asked why the man worked with such exactness. The lantern maker's response held a truth that would reshape Horus's entire approach to life. When light scatters, it creates shadows. But when focused, it reveals the path ahead. Your life follows the same principle. This simple observation illuminated everything Horus had been doing wrong. He'd been treating his energy like a floodlight, trying to illuminate everything at once, and in doing so, he'd created only murky half-light that revealed nothing clearly. The universe responds not to scattered wishes and vague desires, but to concentrated intention, to the kind of focused clarity that burns through uncertainty like a laser through fog. When you know what you want with crystal clarity and direct your energy toward that singular vision, reality reorganizes itself around that focal point. Horus began focusing his scattered energy into a single beam of intention. He stopped sampling every possibility and committed to one clear direction. And as his focus sharpened, his path illuminated. Opportunities that had been invisible in the scattered light of his previous approach suddenly became obvious. Within months, he established himself in meaningful work that had been there all along, waiting for his attention to focus long enough to see it. But focus alone, without flexibility, creates its own problems. In the mountains lived a woodcarver named Gertrude, who demonstrated this perfectly. She approached her craft with intense determination, meticulously planning every cut, every curve, forcing her predetermined vision upon the wood with rigid control. Despite her considerable skill, her creations lacked something essential, a spark of life, a sense of natural flow. They were technically perfect, but spiritually empty. One morning, an old wood carver passed her workshop and observed her tense grip on her tools. He paused and offered wisdom that would transform her entire craft. The wood already knows what it wishes to become. Our task is not to command, but to listen and move with its natural grain. Gertrude initially dismissed this as romantic nonsense. She was the artist, the creator. Surely it was her job to impose her vision on the material. But something about those words lingered. She began approaching her work differently, holding her vision while remaining open to the wood's own nature. She would feel for the grain, sense where the material wanted to flow, work with its inherent character rather than forcing it into predetermined shapes. The transformation in her work was immediate and profound. Her sculptures suddenly came alive, possessing a vitality they'd never had when she was fighting against the material's nature. This is the dance between intention and surrender, between focus and flow, between directing and allowing. You need the clarity of focused intention, knowing what you want, concentrating your energy, burning through the fog of uncertainty. But you also need the flexibility to move with life's natural rhythms rather than against them, to hold your vision while remaining open to how it manifests, to be both the director of your life and a willing dancer in its choreography. Most people fail at manifestation, not because they lack desire or even focus, but because they're trying to force a specific form, rather than allowing the essence of their desire to find its own perfect expression. Like Gertrude trying to impose her will on wood that had its own grain, they create unnecessary resistance. When you combine Horus's focused clarity with Gertrude's fluid cooperation with natural patterns, you unlock a level of creative power that transforms effort into grace. Write in the comments, focused yet flowing, if you're integrating both aspects of this wisdom. So here we are at the end of this particular journey together. If you've made it all the way to this point, that in itself tells me something about you. You're not just casually consuming content. You're genuinely seeking transformation. You're one of the rare ones willing to go deeper, to stay with uncomfortable truths, to actually consider that maybe everything you thought you knew about how reality works needs to be reconsidered. The fact that this video found you and that you stayed through all of it isn't coincidence. Remember what we talked about at the very beginning. The universe has been orchestrating this moment, bringing you exactly what you needed to hear, exactly when you were ready to hear it. And if what we've explored together has resonated with you, if you've felt that spark of recognition, that sense of, yes, this is what I needed, then I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. Because this isn't just random content. This is a path, a journey we're walking together, and there's so much more waiting for you here. Leave a comment right now and just write, "This message was meant for me." Let me know you were here, that you received what the universe delivered through this video. I read these comments, and there's something powerful about declaring your presence, about marking this moment as significant in your own transformation. And if you found value in what we've shared, if any of this landed in a way that shifted something for you, go ahead and hit that like button. It's a simple gesture, but it helps this message find other people who are ready for it, who are searching for exactly what you just discovered. Now, there's something else I want to share with you. There's a video right here that takes what we've explored today and shows you how to apply it in a very specific way. It's the natural next step in this journey. Click and continue with me over there. Let's keep going deeper together.